Now, Corruption Watch says they have received over 100 reports of alleged corruption relating to the Employee Relief Scheme by the end of November 2020. The relief fund was put in place to alleviate financial strain on employees during the strict lockdown that began in March last year. Most of the allegations reported to Corruption Watch referred to employers either registering employees for the relief scheme but not paying the employees or giving them only a fraction of the money due to them. Joining me now is Mashudu Masuta, a legal researcher at Corruption Watch. Mashudu, a very good morning. We've obviously been talking a lot about corruption in governments, but clearly private sector is following close on their heels.
Good morning. Yeah, absolutely. I think what you will see in this report is, just to take a step back so we're clear. The TERS funding was designed for employees, so employees can benefit from it if they were affected by the COVID-19 pandemic. And the way in which it operates is that your employer would apply on your behalf. So your employer would apply on behalf of employees in order for them to receive this benefit. So what we're seeing with the reports that we received is that there's been a number of contraventions of law, but what was important was that employers would apply, but the monies would never receive the ultimate beneficiaries. And what would happen in practice is that the employees would then either receive a reduction of their normal salaries, or they'll be paid below minimum wage. So you had this contravention of basic labor law practices that were happening during COVID, and COVID was used by employers as the reasoning as to why they were being paid in the way in which they were paid.
So what happens to guilty employers?
So that's essentially the suggestion that we've put forward as Corruption Watch is trying to put together a fusion center to ensure that those who are found complicit in the corrupt activities are held accountable. So you have a situation where your oversight bodies and your government institutions, they have valuable information. So they have the data that reflects a lot of what was indicated in our report. A good example is the Auditor General report. Her December audit indicates that she was able to recover about 3.4 billion of the dispersed funds. And she was able to indicate where the vulnerabilities of corruption were. And you have your other institutions like your NPA, who have the prosecuting powers, and your special investigative unit, who have your investigative powers. So what you have is all these government institutions that are almost operating in silos and have all this valuable information, but do not talk to each other in order for there to be accountability. So that is essentially what we're calling for those institutions to start communicating. And for us, we're ready at Corruption Watch to provide the necessary evidence and the necessary reports to these institutions in order for those complicit in corrupt activities to be prosecuted.
So beyond this report that you currently have and that you've made public, which ministries are you speaking to?
So because remember the TERS funding was designed to be some kind of stimulus package that came from the prioritization of budget. So what happened with the TERS funding is that there was an easing of control. So the normal administrative processes was not applied. So there was a sort of a trying to streamline all different kinds of relief packages into one bundle. So the one institution that we've been primarily speaking to is National Treasury, because they are the custodians of the allocation of budget and ensuring that the proper supply chain management and allocation of funds happens the way that it's supposed to. So they're the sort of the institution that holds the purse strings. So we've been engaging with the National Treasury, but we've also been engaging with the Auditor General, particularly on the over 100 reports that we received, because the reports that we're receiving and the one that she has indicated in her December report, as well as to a certain extent her September report, are indicating that we have reports of a similar nature. And what our reports essentially do is show her what is happening on the ground and are able to give her that evidence-driven data. So we're speaking to the Auditor General as well as National Treasury to try and see ways in which these information symmetries can finally be in one centralized area, and there can be some kind of accountability.
Mashood, and if I'm an employee who's a victim of this, what chances do I have for any recourse?
Yeah, it's a very difficult one because essentially what you have is this report is retrospective. So it's indicating trends and patterns that happened during a particular time. And we still get reports about what has happened over the January period because it was subsequently extended, the TERS funding. But what I would suggest to employees is firstly, check whether or not you have been allocated TERS funding. The way in which you can do that is you can go to the Department of Labor's website. There is an icon that's written TERS. You click on that icon and you put in your ID number. And it should indicate to you whether or not your employer has in fact applied for TERS funding for you. If you're in the situation where it has been allocated to you, but you have not been a beneficiary, there is on the same website a complaints mechanism. However, if you feel that the Department of Labor would not be an adequate platform for you to report the matter, you can report it to your nearest police station, or I can suggest that you report it to us at Corruption Watch, and we'll be able to elevate your report to the necessary government institutions.
So this is not only corruption, but it's obviously illegal. It's criminal, in fact, isn't it, for an employer to apply for the employee and then not release those funds, in fact, convert the funds to their own use?
Absolutely, 100%. You have a situation where it's beyond bribery, and you have an almost a syndicate of key individuals who have the authority to make sure that, or who have the objective to make sure that the monies are allocated to the final beneficiary. So you have your employers in private sector, you have members of government officials who are there, you have people in your finance departments and payrolls and administration who are all part of this syndicate to ensure that your most vulnerable groups do not receive the funding. And I think what was particularly concerning about the reports that we received was that they were mostly from industries that during the hard lockdown were considered essential services. So your industries, your members or employees in your petrol stations, in food and beverages, in healthcare. So those were all individuals who during the time of lockdown were required to work. And unfortunately, because of whatever reason that the employer wanted to use, but most of the time the COVID, were paid below what they was expected to be paid, or were required to be in working those normal hours but paid less or below minimum wage. So it's really concerning, but it also is illustrative of the fault lines in society and of South African society, and really a gross human rights violation that has taken place in the administration of this.
It most certainly is. Do you have an indication of the sort of numbers in round terms that we could be talking about?
So in the December audit report, the Auditor General had indicated that she was able to recover 3.4 billion rand of funds that were dispersed incorrectly. So she had mentioned that, you know, with the easing of the controls and the streamlining of processes, there were various reports that indicated misuse of these funds, that indicated poor financial management, that indicated that, you know, people were applying for this funds, but were not supposed to receive this money. So either they were below the legal age of employment, they were deceased, or working in government already, receiving other sorts of social grants, or receiving other benefits from UIF. So what we are able to put in rand terms is 3.4 billion that has been recovered by the Auditor General.
Now, 3.4 billion is a huge amount of money by any standards. What does it say about the processes of releasing these funds if a month down the road we're able to take back money that has been released?
Well, I think it's really two issues. I think on the one hand, it's just reflective of the fact that, the corruption crisis in South Africa is as significant as the economic and health crisis that has hit us as a result of the pandemic. We had to the prioritization of livelihoods and lives and all these programs that were put in place by the president were put in place in institutions that are essentially very weak, that are very corrupt, that the systems are designed not to work for the vulnerable and designed not to work for those who are truly believe in the essence of democracy. So that's the one feature. And on the other hand is you have a situation where accountability is a foreign concept. South Africans, we see reports, media reports, Auditor General reports much like the ones that we have launched and released. And they indicate very clearly that there is an accountability issue. There's evidence that shows that individuals are complicit in corrupt activities, but that's sort of where the story ends. There's no line of accountability. There's no people being prosecuted. There's no changing of laws that protects whistleblowers further than how they are protected. So you have a very weak systemic corruption that is in South Africa, and the reallocation of the budget and the reprioritization of certain sectors has really created a beautiful environment for corruption to thrive.
Mashood, my very last question before we go, which I hope you can answer very quickly. Naming and shaming, is that part of your mandate? Is it something that you can do? Would it deter the levels of corruption that we are witnessing at the moment?
Well, of course, to a certain extent. For us at Corruption Watch, we're very direct and deliberate, and where there is evidence that shows a person has been complicit in corrupt activities, we ensure that that person is named and shamed. The challenge that we have at Corruption Watch is that our powers are very limited. We don't operate like the police or operate like the public protector. So we require those very institutions to do what they are mandated to do, which is to prosecute, which is to ensure that laws are changed and so on. So we can bring evidence and data and reports to the table. But at the end of the day, you do need those institutions to operate the way in which they are constitutionally mandated to do so.
That was legal researcher at Corruption Watch, Mashood Masuta. Thank you so much for joining us.